the image is unforgettable. Europe's most formidable general, Napoleon Bonaparte, staring across endless plains where clouds of dust conceal an enemy unlike any he had faced in the heart of Europe. These were not the drilled infantry squares of Austria, nor the rigid Prussian lines, nor even the disciplined columns of Wellington's redcoats. They were riders, horse archers, heirs of a tradition older than Rome itself. Men who could loose arrows at full gallop, vanish into steppe mist, and return like a storm. Between 1807 and 1814, Napoleon's legions, at the height of their power, would meet this ancient style of warfare in the East. And it was here, on the boundless frontiers, that modern empire collided with the tactics of antiquity. Napoleon had risen to dominance through the mastery of artillery, speed, and discipline. His Grande Army moved like a machine, the most efficient military system Europe had ever seen. But as his gaze shifted eastward toward Russia, toward lands where steppe met forest, he marched into a world where armies were not chained to roads, where soldiers did not need supply wagons, and where the very landscape became a weapon. The traditions of the horse archer had not vanished with the fall of the Mongols. In Russia's vast frontiers, Cossacks, Kalmyks, and Bashkir riders carried on the heritage of the steppe. The year 1807 saw Napoleon at the zenith of his power, after his crushing victories at Austerlitz and Jena by the Treaty of Tilsit. He had compelled Tsar Alexander I into alliance, but peace was fragile, uneasy. In those years, reports reached Napoleon's ears of Russian irregulars, Cossacks whose style of war was alien to his marshals. French officers scoffed at them as a rabble on ponies, yet veterans of the steppes knew better. A Prussian chronicler once warned, "They are not soldiers as we know them, but shadows fire, retreat, and fire again." By 1812, when Napoleon launched his invasion of Russia with over 600,000 men, the clash became inevitable. His army, a mosaic of Europeans, expected set-piece battles like Friedland or Wagram. Instead, from the forests of Lithuania to the approaches of Moscow, they were harried day and night by mounted raiders. The Cossacks and their allies did not fight to hold ground. They fought to bleed. They circled columns, loosed arrows and muskets, severed couriers, and burned supplies. The French officers who once laughed soon called them phantoms of the dawn. Napoleon himself remarked with irritation, "These devils attack where one cannot be." They are the eyes and ears of the Russian army. The build-up to Borodino, the great set-piece battle of 1812, is often told as a tale of two armies marching toward destiny. But in truth, the weeks before it were shaped by constant harassment. As French columns pressed forward, every day brought alarms. Cossacks on the left flank, Cossacks cutting the bridge. Their numbers were never overwhelming, but their effect was profound. Soldiers marched hungry, sleepless, their nerves frayed by the thought that at any moment riders would descend with lances and bows. A Polish lancer in Napoleon's service recorded, "We grew to fear the whistle of arrows more than the roar of cannon. For cannon you can see, but arrows come from nowhere." The climax came not at Borodino itself, but in the retreat that followed. When Napoleon abandoned Moscow in October 1812, his Grande Army was already weakened by hunger and cold. Now, the steppe riders showed their full mastery. They did not line up for battle. They swarmed the stragglers, struck supply trains, and melted away. Arrows blackened the snow where muskets misfired in the frost. French veterans, hardened at Austerlitz and Wagram, confessed they had never seen war like this. A Russian memoir described the campaign. We were not an army pursuing, we were hunters of a wounded beast. The Cossacks' bow and lance found more men than our artillery between 1812 and 1814. As Napoleon fought to preserve his empire in Central Europe, echoes of that steppe war continued. At Leipzig in 1813, the Battle of Nations, horse archers were present again among the Russian contingents. They were not decisive in the clash of artillery and infantry squares, but their presence reminded the French of what awaited them on the long road east. Even in France itself, during the 1814 campaign, Cossack horsemen galloped down avenues and villages, to the shock of peasants who had never imagined Asiatic riders in their fields. Paris itself saw their arrival. A Parisian diarist wrote with awe, "They ride small, tireless horses. They do not dismount. They seem creatures of another age." The immediate aftermath of Napoleon's encounter with the horse archers was devastation. The Grande Armée, which had once numbered more than 500,000, limped out of Russia with scarcely 100,000 survivors. Cold and starvation played their part, but the relentless raids of mounted archers and lancers stripped away order and morale. Soldiers who once marched in proud columns, now scattered in broken bands, always pursued. The myth of invincibility was shattered, not in a single battle, but in countless skirmishes where Europe's most modern army could not pin down enemies who fought like their ancestors on the Eurasian steppes. The legacy of this clash is profound. For centuries, horse archers had been the terror of empires, the Scythians who humbled Persia, the Huns who shook Rome, the Mongols who shattered kingdoms. By the 19th century, many believed such warfare had vanished into legend. Yet Napoleon's war proved otherwise. The horse archer, adapted through the Cossack and steppe traditions, remained a force that could unmake even the most disciplined of European armies. Historians note that Napoleon's failure in Russia was not due solely to winter, as popular myth holds, but to the combined force of climate, logistics, and a style of war he never mastered. As Tolstoy later wrote in War and Peace, the strongest of armies are those who fight not for ground but for breath, for time, for endurance. Today, when we remember Napoleon, we think of Waterloo, of Austerlitz, of imperial grandeur, yet hidden in the shadow of that history lies the reminder that even the mightiest general can be undone by opponents who fight in ways he cannot predict. The horse archers of 1807 to 1814 were not the massed hordes of Genghis Khan, but their spirit lived on in the riders of the Russian plains. They proved that mobility, resilience, and tradition can triumph over modernity when the ground itself favors them as the dust of centuries settles. The story of Napoleon and the horse archers remains a lesson in the limits of power. For here, on the steppes and forests of Eastern Europe, the modern world met the ancient hand. It was the ancient that endured. This episode has been crafted with deep care for history and storytelling. If you value the effort it takes to bring the past alive with accuracy and cinematic detail, consider supporting the continuation of such work. History is not just dates and battles, it is memory, warning, and inspiration, and its stories, told well, deserve to endure.